Well, everyone, good morning. Welcome to another iGaming breakfast briefing here at Healys. And today is a little bit different than what we usually do. We often talk about changes in regulation, maybe banking regulation, maybe legislation, maybe pending legislation. But today we're kind of firmly in the field of marketing and management. So this is going to be pretty interesting and a little bit different from what we normally do. And to help us do that, we've got Mike Rothwell to my left from Caesars. To his left, we have Mr. David Schollenberger. He's obviously our host today from Healys Solicitors. We've got Richard Wade from Rank, John Duffy from Genting. We've got Andrew Tottenham from Tottenham & Co. And let's see, on the screen behind me, coming all the way from the United States of America, where it's apparently 3 in the morning for him. So forgive him if he's slightly drunk. We have Mr. Michael Pollack. And he's from Spectrum Gaming. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Now, if anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand at any time, and I'll point to you, and you can just ask it out loud. If you don't worry, I have plenty prepared. And the first one I have prepared, I'd like to ask Andrew and Michael this question. Why do you think that land-based operators have been relatively slow to launch online? Here we are in 2017, and yes, there are online operations from land-based operators, but mostly nowhere near the scale, the size, or the resource applied to it as you have for the online-only casino operators. Gentlemen.
Can we start? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that they weren't. If you remember, way back in the late 90s, early 2000s, operators jumped in with both feet. And I'm talking about people like Gala, Harris, and what they discovered was that they had no idea about what it was to develop software, to maintain it, and also that they were pretty crap at marketing. And as a consequence, they lost huge amounts of money, and they moved out of it because they discovered it wasn't a business they understood. So it's taken them quite a long time to get back in, and that would be my take on it.
Michael, what is your opinion?
Well, I'm going to give you a U.S. perspective on this. The reluctance from the U.S. perspective, the reluctance of land-based operators to jump in with both feet initially is not only not surprising, it was actually quite predictable. 15 years, as far back as 15 years ago, we projected that would be the approach, that land-based operators would start with an extreme reluctance and a view that online was a threat, to ultimately to acceptance and eventually embrace, and we're moving along that continuum to be. And we looked at this basically by looking at other industries that had been challenged by emerging technologies that changed the way we all live and do business. And I think it's kind of interesting. We looked at the relationship between, going back to the 1920s, essentially a full century ago, as to how the internet of its day, radio, threatened professional sports, which initially viewed it as a way that people weren't going to come to stadiums because they can listen to games on radio. And ultimately, obviously, professional sports accepted and then embraced broadcasting as a critical part of its business model. A more recent example is how Hollywood was threatened by the internet of its day, which was television. People weren't going to go to movies because they could stay home and watch television. But as we recognize, television became a critical part of Hollywood's business model. And we see that precisely the same thing unfolding with respect to land-based operators in the U.S. Because don't forget, there's 1,000 casinos in the U.S. doing $70 billion U.S. dollars annually. So with a lot of capital invested. So it's not surprising they followed that same continuum. We are now at a different point. We are now at the point where it's clearly acceptance and moving toward embrace. That's where we are in the U.S.
And of course, in 2004, we had MGM come online. You saw Sun Casinos go online. Stanley Ho's been on and offline. I'm not sure if they have an online operation right now, but they were clearly an early adapter. But you also saw people dip their toe in and come out of the online business that were early adopters. For instance, MGM was only online for, I think, 2 years. Why do you think that there was a slow start to those early adopters? A lot of you were around at that time, so to anyone really on the panel.
I'd say they started, if you remember, in Isle of Man, and the regulations were not very friendly. It was very difficult to build up any kind of mass because you had to do, people had to fax in their copies of their passports. There was a whole KYC that was just very, very difficult for customers to comply with, and so it just finished up as a loss-making concern, so it came out of it. So it was regulatory.
I worked for Stanley Leisure back in 2000, and we had Stanley Acropolis, and I remember we actually gave out the discs in the casino to the customer, licensed in Curacao. It wasn't a tremendous success.
Yeah,
No, I absolutely remember that.
Yeah, I would agree. The regulation, in fact, certainly from the UK, insofar as it wasn't legal to actually operate from this country, so we all had to immediately go offshore, which is in itself was quite a big commitment. I mean, it's not a slow process, as Andy said. I mean, we started in 2001 with our own rank.com, a similar approach with handing out discs. We bought Blue Square in 2002 to buy in the expertise, which was then, I think, it was the first online bookmaker over here. And we plugged away ever since, but certainly I think the regulation and then having to operate with two separate fields was difficult. But I think that one of the biggest things we also had was cultural, and I think it's been mentioned already, a very good analogy Mike made in terms of Hollywood, etc., the fear of the new baby that's come in and is going to cause, destroy their existing business, to get our managers to accept that it was a good thing to promote the online business. To our biggest asset is the fact that we've got a whole database of customers who are gamblers, who therefore could thrive as a new online business. But the natural instinct is to think, why would I promote online to my customer, because I will lose my business? And it took quite a few years, and in fact the thing that changed it was when it came home to them that we have now, or certainly a year or two ago, about 3% of our customers from our retail casinos play with us online.
3%.
3% or so. This was the old figures, but they're not too far off. 3% of them play with us online, but 50% of them play online. And that made a huge difference to people to say, we're not talking about them stealing your retail business online. We're talking about stealing other online business to go on online, because they are playing online anyway. So either you get them to play on our site, or they're just going to play with 888 or whoever it is. And that was really a big turning point culturally, I think, for people to suddenly embrace the idea of, yes, we will promote grosvenorcasino.com or mecabingo.com as something that is well worth pursuing for the greater good of the company, and it's not stealing money from that gaming table online, it's stealing it from someone else's live game or online game, and that has made a significant change. So now our focus is very much towards online, has been for 2 or 3 years since our CEO Henry Birch joined us, and that sort of joined up thinking is the strength that's been missing, and I think, as Andrew said, had that been there from 2002, 3, 4, along with the software expertise, we would all have been a lot further down the line. But there is always that sort of concern of something new and frightening that's threatening, and I think that threat has to be neutralised and seen as a positive rather than a threat to make it a success.
And another factor, I think, that created reluctance of some of the largest global operators to get involved in it is just the regulatory risk. They were used to knowing inside out the regulation in the U.S. states and the U.K. and wherever they had land-based casinos, suddenly online gaming is a global pursuit. There are different laws in every jurisdiction, and it's very difficult to control sometimes how where users are using your products. So just the risk of regulatory sanctions on their kind of bread and butter licenses was I think a factor too, in not jumping into it with both feet until it was really a proven kind of product.
Yeah, I think you guys are all you're right on that. We're talking about asset risks, right? You're talking about the risk of the asset of the license. If you lose that land-based license, then all of a sudden you're out of business. You can no longer operate. If you accidentally take a bet from somewhere you shouldn't, and therefore that affects your terrestrial casino business, you're done. You've got the risk of the physical asset then at that point. So, I mean, look at Caesars. If Caesars took a misstep in 2001, there are billions and billions and billions of dollars worth of land and materials and assets and gaming machines that would be at risk. So no one really wants to put their neck on the line, I suppose. What about management skills? Do you think that there was a skill set that was lacking in the land-based casino market that stopped people from going online?
Let me develop a little bit what Richard said. I mean, I think about the perception in our business at the time. So at that time, we weren't Caesars; we were London clubs,
right.
And there was that fear. I think there was a perception, and there was a people challenge. The perception, the fear was that everybody would go to online. Why would we prefer to see it? The casinos would be empty, tumbleweed, and we'd have to shut them all. And that feeling was definitely prevalent in the London clubs business at the time. And then you were also asking people whose job it was to run casinos, land-based casinos, who knew about customer service, knew where to put tables, how many rotations of the roulette wheel you needed per hour, how to do a rota, to do this thing that was entirely different for them. And the skills, certainly in our business, just didn't exist. And I think Rank probably did the right thing, went externally to try and find it. But you were trying to get a bunch of leopards to change their spots, and those leopards really struggled with it. So we were... online's evil, the world will collapse. That was the belief at the time.
And I think it's also important to remember that at that time, the old Licensing Act had a requirement for demand. So basically, in the states in a way too, you have a fiefdom that's granted to you by the government that says, in this particular territory, you're the most accessible by this group of people, and there's your little fiefdom. Just don't mess up your license and act correctly, and that's your only job. Don't worry about marketing or anything else, because we're going to create a little monopoly fiefdom for you. Just make sure you're highly regulated. And I think that mindset was very pervasive, and it still is really in a lot of the land-based industry. Whereas in the online industry at that time, the operators were outpacing the law as far as their technology went. They were going faster than the law could keep up with them. And the only risk they really had was if they got caught and they got shut down, they might have to leave a market, or they might lose some servers. There wasn't really a lot of risk from their point of view in going online, where there was huge risks, of course, for the land-based industry. So it sounds like you're saying that the online gaming didn't wind up cannibalizing your market at all. Do you think that the online industry grew the market? And that's for John and for Richard and for Mike.
Well, ironically, in terms of the fear, there was equally a fear that when online poker, for example, came in, poker rooms, again, Hollywood example, would close down. In fact, many did. The early 2000s wasn't a great time for poker. But funnily enough, online poker has actually regenerated the retail market because, and it's actually quite reassuring for retail businesses, the fact that even though online poker is fantastic and it's become a huge marketplace, that desire of people to actually interact with real people, so it creates a whole generation of new young players playing online. The poker practices and flatteringly called in some cases these great guys, mathematical experts. But when it then came to taking their skills further, they wanted to play against real people. And so the World Series, as I'm sure people know, suddenly the table in the final was full of people who'd qualified online. It was a bit of a culture shock in terms of the old lag players, the Amarillo Simple, these wonderful characters, whose skill was based on reading the tells of people's faces. But these guys, with their headphones and their baseball caps, not even looking at the other guy because they're almost playing a mathematical game, completely changed the culture, but they want to still play in a live environment. So our poker rooms have become far more successful, and I don't think it's just because of a desire from people to play retail poker generally. It's kind of created that marketplace from people who have played online, because the fear by reverse, that sort of horror of playing against these sharky people on a poker table who you've never played before, and you've got to go and sit down in a room with them. Playing online is a much safer environment to actually learn your skill without feeling intimidated. But once you've got those skills, then you want to go and take them on in the flesh. And as I said, it's encouraging to know that people still want that interaction, and I think it's therefore good for the business in that way, and therefore we can work very happily side by side. Instead from poker, I think it's a very good example of that, of how one has bred the other or regenerated the other, as it were.
John, do you think that applies to the casino world as well? Do people come online when they're of age and then learn to play blackjack and roulette and baccarat? And then
I'm not so sure it does, to be honest. I think our experience certainly mirrors that of Richard. Once our managers accept the fact that our customers are playing online, and that they may as well, if they're going to play online, they may as well play online with us. That has been the turning point in gaining that understanding and being able to bring customers to play with us online. You asked the question earlier about whether the management skills transfer. Right. My personal view is that they're actually very different businesses. A true online casino is essentially, it's a marketing, it's purely a marketing business. You get the marketing right, you have the process, you have the search engine optimization, you put something in the top and you'll get your percentage out the bottom. Totally different skills to operating an actual land-based casino.
Well, then let me ask. You're absolutely right. Different skill sets, but clearly by operating an online and a land-based casino, you would think that someone who has both sides of the equation should have a huge advantage over someone who's only online, or indeed someone who's only land-based. Just in terms of assets.
I'd like to address that.
Yeah, why haven't we seen land-based casinos that are going online more heavily leveraged than land-based casino? I mean, you mentioned earlier handing out those little handing out CDs for Stanley Bet, wasn't it? Yeah. And in the casinos, and maybe Ladbrokes handing out CDs from Ladbrokes. But why haven't we seen more of that? Why haven't we seen the land-based asset more leveraged in order to get more value out of the online?
I truly believe it's out of proportion to the land-based business. So to get the cut through online, you would have to spend, say, 50, 60 million annually on TV advertising to get the cut through, to get the business, to take on one of the big current operators. For a land-based casino, it's a different business. The same would apply to any other company. If they want to spend the money on the marketing to get the cut through, they can do. But just because you operate a land-based casino does not mean you then wish to spend £60 million on TV advertising in the hope to take your percentage.
But what about the value proposition? I'll get to you in a second. Sorry. The value proposition. Now, I think at Genting, you guys are allowing people to cash in and cash out at your cage for their online accounts. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. So it's a unique selling point in essence that you can gamble online and you can cash out within the casino and vice versa. But it's ancillary to the land-based operation.
It's ancillary to the land-based operation. It does seem. Do you seem like you're butting heads against the land-based operations when you want to add something like that in? When you say a free hamburger for anyone that has an account, or whatever it might be?
No, exactly as Richard said. When we started this, there was lots of resistance. Managers don't want to give their customers to online, so you start by encouraging the managers. So the club can take a percentage of if the customer plays online, the club can take a percentage. The big cut through has really been getting the understanding our customers are playing online anyway. They are going to do that. So why wouldn't they do that with us? Right. And why would you not encourage them to do that with us?
Yeah. I'll go Andrew, and then we'll go with Michael. Andrew?
Well, I just wanted to experience in France. I'm on the board of a French casino group, and we have online betting. And we used to have online poker, and we got out of online poker because we couldn't pool liquidity. So we've only got 22 casinos. So our market was pretty small, and we were up against two big incumbents, the Française des Jeux and the PMU. But we have a betting business, and our experience has been, well, one, it loses money. But that's changing because we're now changing the business model. The business model we're using is we're actually putting, we're testing this currently, is sports bars in our venues. And we have now got, similar to what you're saying, is the management, that culture of actually this is good for your business because you're going to be driving people into the sports bars, as opposed to this is something they can do somewhere else. So we're now seeing our sign-ups are really increasing. What we're actually seeing is actually the betting is much lower than the ones that we recruit online, but we're seeing them more frequently. So it's actually it's working its way through. But we're leveraging our asset, our physical asset, to drive people in the online on the online business, as opposed to the other way around, which is to
completely opposite mindset of what we talked about from the early 2000s. Michael, did you want to add anything?
Yes, thank you. Before real money online became a reality in the U.S., we fully anticipated that it would grow the overall market and minimize cannibalization. And we've been surprised, frankly, by the data that has come in, and the surprise is to the upside. It's grown the market, frankly, more than we anticipated. And some of the data points that we've seen are absolutely astounding. And I'm looking at New Jersey, where it's full blown online, and we have some good data from it. And Caesars, for example, reports that 80% of its online players are new customers, i.e., they were not enrolled in its total rewards program. And of those players in its total rewards database, more than 40% of those who played online had been inactive prior to the offering of online play, and then they reactivated. Tropicana, interesting, similar. 60% of the players who signed on to play were new acquisitions. They were not in the database, and of the remaining 40%, half of them had been inactive or lapsed. Golden Nugget in Atlantic City, 89% of their players who played online were new players and were not in their database. And interestingly, many of these new players are coming to the casino to play in the physical facility, and are also spending money in non-gaming areas, and essentially have grown the entire pie. And I should also point out that the question that was asked earlier about the regulatory related issues, and it was pointed out that certainly, and I fully agree, that land-based operators are not going to risk their enormous assets on licensing related issues. But one of the things that we fundamentally believe is that the licensing issues and the licenses that operators do hold, which are viewed as privileged, assets that they can leverage in the online sphere to send out a message that these games are well run and honest and all that goes with it. And one last point that tied to the earlier discussion, the tax rate. In New Jersey, the online tax rate is about twice the tax rate for land-based. So that creates a significant incentive for operators to leverage their online database to get them on site, because that difference, the tax rate is in half. That drops straight to the bottom line, and that is a significant incentive. That's not going to be available in multiple states, where the tax rates in some jurisdictions can approach, on land-based gaming, can approach 50% or more. So but New Jersey, that's a little bit different, because New Jersey has a very low tax rate on its land-based play of only 8%. So that creates that incentive to get them the online play into the land-based facilities. In some other jurisdictions, that proposition may be entirely reversed.
So we've seen, you're discussing about you discussed the online, the terrestrial players converting to, the online players converting to terrestrial players, and reviving the stale databases by using the online proposition. But for those that are operating terrestrial casinos that are online, are you finding your online databases are providing you a good source of customers, or are you finding it very difficult to convert from that database? Or are you indeed finding that when you cross-reference customers you may have gotten from advertising elsewhere, you're getting them at that, they're getting those customers at a lower CPA because they already have interaction with your brand? So I guess I'm asking the opposite of what Michael's just saying, and asking you if the terrestrial database is converting well to the online player.
Let me have a go at that. I guess if we track back a little bit, let's think about market size. If we go back a number of years, and I'll come to your question, Michael, as I go this thought process, if I can keep my thoughts together. So many years ago, UK casino industry was fairly insular, I would say. Not a lot of people knew about it. We always used to moan about the penetration rates being less than 5%. I think we probably still do, but I think they're definitely higher than that. And what happened was online came in, and poker being a prime example, people became aware that casino gaming in the UK was actually all right. It wasn't scary or horrible or anything like that. It was actually okay and a safe thing to do. So we definitely saw growth in the market. We definitely saw more comfort with people playing poker, for example. And the way Michael's just described it in terms of the New Jersey experience is absolutely spot on. So the migration between the two, what happened was, as we've gone forward, the UK land-based casino industry has typically stuck to its guns to a large extent, and then added bits on through white label deals, those sort of things. So I don't really know how to do that, so I'll put something on the side, I'll put something on the side. I think now that fear of online is going to kill the world, or kill the land-based industry, is being used a little bit as an excuse. And operators, certainly in the UK, ought to have a complementary online presence to support their land-based operations both ways. Because if people are gamblers, they're probably gambling already, either on an online portal or in a land-based casino, or both. Probably more likely both, I would suggest. Although I don't have any data to support that, so somebody might shoot me down in flames on it. I think it's likely that those online operators who currently play with, let's say GVC, very very well run company, very smart guys, but that's all they offer. And I think, maybe come to Caesars a bit later on in the discussion, but if Caesars was running an online casino, people would feel more comfortable with that than they perhaps would do with the GVC, because they would say, okay, look, I'm gambling with GVC, it seems to work fine, I get the cards, I generally trust it, etc., etc. But this is Caesars, and I know those guys, and I go down to 5 or 8 of their casinos in the UK. So where's the migration going to happen? Caesars in the UK currently doesn't really have an online presence, so I see a migration happening from the pure online operators into those operators that have a trusted brand on the land-based side, or a trusted brand full stop. Sky, for example, Virgin, brands like that, I think people would trust as well. But there's you would definitely see a crossover from online into the trusted brand model. Rank to a lesser extent. I don't mean any disrespect to Rank as a brand. Rank is a good brand. People would say, okay, I know Rank, I trust them. I know they have casinos called Grosvenor and all these sort of things. So that would seem more legitimate to me. Not that GVC is not legitimate in any way, shape, or form. Great operators, but there's just that bit more trust and solidity about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very true because of those brands you said. It is our core strength in terms of getting customers to go and play online. And I suppose a good example of that is, John rightly says, we haven't got the money to throw in billions onto advertising. But if you take the example of Mecca Bingo, slightly off message, but it's our other brand, an incredibly well-known brand in retail customers, even for people who don't actually play with them. Everyone knows the Mecca Bingo brand. It's been around for 50, 60 years. So consequently, when they're looking for a site, they decide to play online, as Mike absolutely rightly says, and you're looking down a list of, again, no offence to them, Joy Bingo or Foxy Bingos or whatever it might be, they've heard of those, but there are an awful lot of other ones. But when you see Mecca, it's a name that they will recognise, and it's that trust, as again Mike says, is very important. When you're going online, you're going to be giving over your card details and such like. I think it does count for a lot, and so our Mecca site has been hugely more growth and success and a crossover, and is one of the top online bingo brands, without doing that much more than the casino. The casino one has struggled more because of the fact there are less casinos. It's a brand we all know, Grosvenor Casinos, but the people who've never been to a casino or whatever have never heard of it any more than they've heard of 888 or such like. So that I think is quite important, and it's what we certainly play on. So we've made, the online look and feel is identical to the look and feel of the casinos. The machine games are the same ones you can get in club, or to make people feel comfortable. In fact, the biggest growth area on the online casino is in fact the live game, which comes from Malta. People, our customers who are used to that interaction, it gives them a bit of a taste of what they're used to from the comfort of their own home or sitting on the bus wherever they play, but they still like it. And so we make the sort of the online offer look and feel like the sort of casino experience in that they would otherwise have. But the bit I mentioned earlier on, I'm not sure what the exact figure is now in terms of the number that they actually do play, but that's such a huge growth potential, which is why so much focus is there. I mean, every online brand clearly wants to grow its marketplace, but when you've got an untapped market of 40-odd% of a couple of million people, that's a huge amount of people who are there for the taking that we can target and hopefully lure across to it. You'll come to it sure later in terms of regulation. One of the biggest problems we've got, of course, is the law. Thanks to our friends from the Commission here, they only have to apply it, but the law was written on the basis that online gaming was a threat, that any online terminal was a potential gaming machine, so had to be forbidden from the confines of a casino premises. So we can market and say how fabulous our brand is and offer them all sorts of trinkets, but what we can't do is offer online gaming from inside our casino. They have to go outside and play it on the way home. And that's quite tying your hands behind the back, because that huge selling point of being able to say, it's great, have a look at it, play it. You can say, have a look at it, but don't you dare touch that. You'll have my license. And it's a rather perverse operating culture, and we've obviously been working with the Commission and the DCMS to get that change. But again, Mike, in America's point in terms of tax, the government would then be concerned that if we're putting people online, instead of a 50% tax, washing wheat from America, 50% tax that we pay in London for casino play, as opposed to 15% online. Do they want to drive that marketplace online? A bit risky, not sure we want to do that. And so we face a lot of obstacles in terms of what we see as the common sense approach, which is to say, online gaming should be permitted from a terminal inside the casino as much as anything else. It's not a slot machine, and we've had to have some quite fun discussions with Erica and the guys in the DCMS to try and perhaps make it a sort of category of machine that's a sort of, and it's sort of almost depressing to think that that's what you've got to do to get what is a very modern device that people can otherwise say, I'm not doing that, I'll go and sit and play on my phone in the bar on online, because we can't physically offer them a terminal or iPad on a stick or whatever to do it, because the iPad, or rather the iPhone, was invented 3 months before the Act came in 2007, I think almost 10 years ago this very day or so. So there was no perception of that type of technology. So banning it from the casinos is now rather meaningless, because people are doing it whether they like it or not, but they're just doing it from their pocket. So it's still an uphill battle, and I think we've all got that struggle in terms of making a piece of 10-year-old legislation, which we always thought was going to be the great hope for the future and being modern rather than the old 68 Act, and it's already so out of date in so many ways. It's actually very frightening in terms of the future of our industries.
Can I just come in there a little bit, Richard? Well, we're transitioning into a bit of a lobbying effort, Erica, so apologies on that. It's funny, when you think about online gaming in a standalone form is not a natural human state, I don't think. People don't generally prefer isolation to socialisation as human beings. So it's more natural I think, might get a reaction from the audience here, it's more natural that humans will want to socialise in groups, and therefore casinos, if they want to do gambling, for example, are a good place to do that because there are quite a number of people there. Bingo halls are a good place to do it because there are quite a few people there. Football matches are a good place to do it because there's quite a few people there. So being in larger groups is a more natural human state. So why then, it's not a question for you, Erica, why then philosophically is online product not permitted in a casino environment? And I think for me, ignore the lobbying side of it. It's a question of time. In time, what will a casino look like? It will have much more modern product that looks digital, looks modern, looks like the innovative online stuff that's there, but it will be in that sociable environment with food and beverage around it, with entertainment, all those sort of things, with human interaction. So I think that's where we're going. It's just a case of how does the regulator manage or interpret the law and apply the law to keep up with that, recognising that humans are sociable creatures and that to do responsible gaming in a sensible environment that needs human interaction, etc., etc., etc. So apologies, Erica, for a bit of lobbying there. The stance makes no sense, but maybe the law just needs to catch up.
So speaking on behalf of our regulator here, because I've always thought it. I believe the difficulty really is with online. Of course, you have unlimited stakes and prizes. You can use credit cards. So while of course it's not common sense that you can't offer online in a casino, to be able to do so, you would have to look at those other factors.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
so it's a much wider issue.
John, I totally agree. I think those are details in the great scheme of humanity. So 10 years' time, I think casinos will look quite different. I think the regulator will be very comfortable with online product there, with those restrictions you say. Are unlimited stakes and prizes a good idea? I don't know, probably not, or with some controls around it. Should credit exist in a market, provided it's correctly managed, then yes, why not?
Can I?
Yes, please. I'd love you to.
Yeah, I think the Commission and DCMS are painfully aware that the way that the legislation, the primary legislation is framed, has not kept up with technological developments, which have just been so fast and so massive. And so the framework of the Act is a complete dichotomy between remote and non-remote. And I think when it was drafted, nobody imagined how they would converge. And similarly, we've got an obsession with products. So there are rules for casinos, there are rules for bingo, there are rules for betting, and people don't gamble in that kind of silo manner. We're beginning to understand how much players do like a variety of products. They like to mix the online, the physical live stuff. And then that's even before you start thinking about different, new forms of payment, and there are a whole load of things that we weren't imagined. But we are constrained by the legislation. So I think what we are trying to do is work with the industry and with DCMS to see what can be done within the existing legislation, what we can do by changing secondary legislation, because it's easier to find time for secondary legislation to go through than to try and tackle the Act itself. After the election, things are slightly up in the air. I don't quite know how things are going to work out, but we are conscious that we can't just try and hold gambling in the 20th century. We have to work out how to move with the times, but very often we are limited by what the legislation says. We can't just ignore bits of the legislation that we all agree are inconvenient and unhelpful.
And for what it's worth, Erica, I think the regulators are actually doing a pretty good job, because things are moving so fast, as you say, and there's so many things to think about. Resources are constrained. We've had a number of discussions. You've had a number of discussions with the industry. It's where will we be in 10, 20 years' time? We said that 15 years ago. We said, what would a casino look like? And 15 years later, it was exactly the same. I don't think that will be the case with the way technology is moving. So in 10 years' time, I think it will be quite different.
I'd just like to say, I think one of the issues is that you talk about the industry, and it's not an industry, it's actually 4 different industries, and they're regulated in different ways, as we're saying, in the silo approach. And the problem is that any relaxation in one area is seen as a threat by the others, and there is this internecine war that goes on quite publicly, which is not helpful. And so the result is that it's easier for politicians to just put their heads down and let the industry war amongst itself, as it is actually make some progress on
And gambling is seen as toxic by all parties.
Yeah.
So
Yes. Very
It's
much
hard to
so.
get politicians who are going to fight for anything.
Hi, David Mills from Cash Compliance. Can any of this amalgamation of the industries come about when taxation is in such polar opposite positions?
Yes, I think. I haven't really thought it through, Dave. So it exists already, clearly. So online taxation is different from offline taxation. What does it mean? So if we have a land-based tax rate which is greater than an online tax rate, and the business then creates two elements to that, does that create an advantage for the land-based operator because the higher margin business, depending on the marketing reinvestment in online, enables more to be done for the land-based, so they become complementary anyway? So I think the simple answer is yes, they can. There's a more philosophical question: is should they be out of line? And if you look at the inputs into the land-based model of the labour costs required, the bricks and mortar, the rent that's required, contrast that with the online, where it's pretty much an entirely variable marketing expense, the tax almost seems to be the wrong way around to me.
Well, yes and no, except in the land-based model, traditionally you're provided, you're part of a small group of people granted the license, whereas in the online model, you're competing with offshore operators who are operating at zero tax and therefore can offer better bonusing.
Sure.
So if you were taxed at 50%, you wouldn't be able to compete on an international online basis. But because
it was a principal point,
right.
I agree,
Yeah,
Michael.
sure.
It was a principal point rather than.
But it's interesting.
Thanks,
Taking Michael's view, it's almost labour protectionism in New Jersey by having higher taxation for online, so it's protecting the land-based business. Whereas in most of the international gambling business, it's the complete opposite. That land-based carry a much heavier burden.
Yeah.
I think New Jersey
I'd like to
Online
just elaborate on that last point, is that as more and more states come online, you're not going to see the New Jersey model replicated. You're going to see a significantly lower tax rate for online than you will for land-based, simply because the land-based tax rates are already in place. They did not anticipate online. They were established purely for political purposes, not economic purposes, and consequently it's going to be the reverse of the New Jersey model, where the online rate is going to have to be lower simply for economic purposes, and consequently you're going to be in a situation where you may inadvertently create a situation where land-based operators are going to seek a greater online play because the tax rate will be significantly lower.
Michael, let me continue to ask about New Jersey. New Jersey, I think, just passed $20 million in revenue a couple months ago per month, which is substantial for that market. But why has it been so slow to grow from 0 to 20 million? And with all the marketing that has been done, why haven't New Jersey online casinos been more successful?
Well, I would argue that they are quite successful. I think one of the reasons is, and it's still relatively new in the game. And bear in mind that under New Jersey law, and this is true for every state that offers online and will presumably continue, is that there's strong geolocation restrictions. You have to be physically located within the state of New Jersey to gamble online. And as you get into border areas, they tend to err on the side of pushing you out of the system rather than in. But I would suggest that, in our view, it's actually should be viewed as rather successful, and we don't simply measure the online revenue based on, or the online benefit based on the direct online revenue, but on the total revenue generated by those customers, which is sort of hidden in the overall gaming revenue numbers, because there is significant land-based play from those online players, and you are dealing with a materially younger demographic online. And were it not for online, the land-based casino operators in New Jersey would have great difficulty attracting that younger demographic. So its marketing benefit is significant, and that's how I think it should be measured. And by that, I think you would have to deem it rather successful.
And there's barriers to entry in New Jersey and other U.S. states that have legalized online gaming, in that you have to be a land-based operator to get a license in the first place. So, and whether that model will continue from state to state remains to be seen. But it's difficult for new entrants to the market if you have to own bricks and mortar casinos to get into it.
And David, where do you think that leaves Indian casinos, Indian gaming, racetracks, card rooms in California? Do you see a model in the future whereby they'll also participate in the online casino revenue? Or do you think it'll be just state licensed non-Indian gaming entities?
I think there'll be continue to be a dichotomy between the Indian and the commercial gaming, just by virtue of the political nature of how it's rolled out through the years. I think Indian gaming revenue accounts for about half of the or more of the U.S. total gaming revenue, and they've got quite strong lobbies, and I can't imagine that they're going to back down and allow it to change anytime soon.
Yeah.
Could I address that briefly?
Sure.
Part of the issue is as Indian gaming is considered in the online world. One of the issues is that the actual online players have to be physically located within the parameters of the reservation, which for many it's not a particularly enticing proposition. But it's going to be determined largely, I think, by compacts between the states and the tribes in the U.S. Because bear in mind that in the U.S., and David's right in that Indian gaming accounts for more than $30 billion in land-based revenue. But there's a real dichotomy in that a significant portion of that, a huge portion of that, can be allocated to the top 3 or 4 tribes, where the vast majority are rather small in revenue, and they're not going to be able to gain much in online either.
Well, I don't know. That's an interesting thing that you just said. That they're not. I assume you're saying because they don't have the brand. Yet on the other hand, here we're hearing that the land-based operators here can't compete with the online operators because they don't have the 20 or 30 million to advertise per month on television. Which would lead me to believe that if I was a tribe in the middle of nowhere with almost no revenue, as long as I could go to a private equity firm and get 30 million, I could go and start advertising and compete with the big boys. Andrew, why am I wrong?
Because geolocation, you have to be on the reservation.
Yeah.
And if you don't know anything about where the tribes are, when the Westerners came over to the United States, they basically pushed the tribes into all the places that they didn't want. And so if you look at the map of reservations in the United States, they're in pretty, well, apart from California, they're in pretty awful locations, so it's very difficult. The other point was about New Jersey, which I was touching on, was saying about why it's not taken off quite as well as people thought. And that is banks don't process payments. They're still concerned about the legality of this, so they don't want to jeopardize their licenses being caught processing transactions to do with gambling. So there are a lot of declines, still a lot of declines in New Jersey. I don't know what the rate is.
Probably around 30% decline rate. Michael, is that about right?
Say that again, David. I'm sorry.
The decline rate from Visa and MasterCard, 20 to 30% in New Jersey?
I'm not so sure about that. I don't know offhand directly, but what I'm finding, though, is that Andrew's right on all of the above, but what I'm finding, and because I live in New Jersey, I just tested out, it's very, very easy, frankly, to sign up online and play. It's not difficult at all. And it's if anything, it's getting easier. So that's becoming less and less of an issue.
And let me ask you, Michael, Borgata seems to be losing market share. At first, they're the clear leader. Now their revenue seems to be falling relative to others, and Golden Nugget seems to be leading the pack. I think Golden Nugget announced something like $6 million in revenue for May, and Borgata was down to around $3 million. What's one doing better than the other?
I would argue it's an interesting point. Golden Nugget is I think I would have to attribute it significantly to marketing prowess and being a little more aggressive in their marketing for online.
Okay. What about game selection? That was cited in the early days as something that was limiting the growth of the online gaming market in New Jersey because they didn't have all the games that you'd expect to find in their casinos. Do you think that's still a problem, and do you think that was significant then, or just an excuse?
Again, it depends on where you stand on it depends on where you sit. I think that it is somewhat of an issue, but becoming less so. I think that from my experience in online play, it's becoming it's obviously appealing more to the slot player and the poker player than it is to the traditional table games player. But that issue is going to smooth itself out over time. One of the interesting points in New Jersey, and bear this in mind, is that the brick and mortar land-based operators are allowed to have multiple licenses, multiple sites, and they are outsourcing much of this to third parties. And one of the interesting points about this is just yesterday, just to test it out, I went onto one of the sites affiliated with Golden Nugget, and it's Sugar House, which is a division of Rush Street Gaming, and they have a facility in Pennsylvania, just over the New Jersey border. And if you play on that site, there's virtually no reference that I could find to Golden Nugget Atlantic City. Now, they'll obviously have access to the database, but there's significant encouragement for those people who sign up on that site to play at Sugar House in Philadelphia. And Sugar House has actually reported that they've increased their land-based play in Pennsylvania as a result of their ability to market and offer online in New Jersey. That would clearly fall under the law of unintended consequences. I don't think New Jersey anticipated that, but it's interesting nonetheless.
I mean, it might speak to the fact that New Jersey or Atlantic City as a city is a less desirable destination than Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Do you think there's an element of why Sugar House is a more successful enterprise than most of the Atlantic City casinos? Or why Philadelphia?
No, I have a fundamental disagreement with that. I think that certainly, I don't think that the desirability. If you've been to Philadelphia or Atlantic City, it's a toss-up as to which is more physically desirable. I think it's a question that a lot of these people happen to be relatively closer to Philadelphia than they are to Atlantic City. But I would just fundamentally argue that, be it Atlantic City or anywhere in the world, that all things being equal, that land-based operators have a significant advantage over online in general, largely because of the 2 points that, one of which was raised earlier, and we discussed it, is that the value of the license and the brand and the trust that accompanies that. But the other is that people, and this was also raised earlier, people are hardwired to enjoy social settings. And I think that's an enormous advantage that land-based operators have. And really, the only obstacle to leveraging that is that the industry is still learning how to effectively market those clear advantages. But David, to your point, I really, maybe I'm too close to it, but I really don't see. I mean, the facilities in Atlantic City, and you mentioned Borgata, you mentioned and Golden Nugget. I think they're world-class operations, and arguably are much more attractive than a Sugar House in Philadelphia, which really can't invest too much in its land-based facility because it pays such a high tax rate on its land-based gaming revenue.
I was more speaking to the cities themselves as a desirability. So just for anyone here who's thinking about flying to either of them, go to Philly. Get a cheesesteak. I want to talk about regulation in just a second, but I wanted, Michael, ask you another follow-up question regarding land-based casinos going online. Do you think the market doesn't reward the online revenue derived from land-based casinos as much as it does the revenue derived from its terrestrial facility? Or on the contrary, do you think that land-based casinos' share prices are being punished for not being good at online gaming? Because that's obviously a huge driver, not just tax.
Is that question addressed to me?
Yes, it is.
You're asking essentially what Wall Street's attitude is, effectively. And I think that they're on a learning curve as well, in that they don't quite yet, in my view, and I don't track these stocks on a daily basis or anything along those lines, but I fundamentally believe that they, like so many other people, simply do not yet grasp the full value of online as both as a marketing tool and as a driver of land-based revenue. We're at the beginning of a learning curve, and Wall Street is no different than the regulators or the operators themselves at being able to grasp the benefits and the ultimate underlying value of online. So it's going to take some time.
Okay. David, let me ask you a question. What do you think the legal issues facing the land-based casinos going online are today? You talked about 2004, but what about 2017?
2017. I mean, it's the same issue about having the fundamental kind of prized crown jewel are the land-based licenses, and concern that there's regulatory risk involved in online that requires a high degree of vigilance and a high degree of risk that something is going to go wrong at any minute, and competitive pressures to operate in places that they shouldn't be, and or riskier than others. So I would say that regulatory risk is of operating globally or in several jurisdictions is one of the key detractions or concerns about land-based companies going into online and staying in online in a big way.
Okay. And that's, I guess, across the board in every jurisdiction. Now, what do you as a panel think online casinos are doing right that the land-based market could learn from?
I think there is. I think it's mentioned earlier on. I mean, they are so different in terms of the market. And one of the key differences, I guess, as Andrew alluded to, in terms of the fact that we are siloed both by nature, premises, design, and legislation in retail. In terms of you're a casino, and you can't offer betting if you're a casino, and if you're a bingo club, you can't offer gambling, and yet all of the online sites essentially, it's almost a natural thing that they all offer everything. Ladbrokes is very much a retail bookmaker, but they're also an incredibly successful online casino, and they offer betting, poker, and everything else as well, because it's just a click away. So I think the fact that these things can sit very comfortably together, and again Andrew's point earlier on, that really it's a healthy thing, that Eric was alluding to it as well, that gambling should perhaps be seen in the round and not so different, that not so much we can learn from it, but I'd like to think the government could learn from that, because as Dave mentioned in the audience as well, because of the bizarre different tax structures which by definition force that separation between the two, it makes it very different to move towards that, because one's taxed at 20, 25, 15, 50, whatever else it is. They don't sit comfortably together, and yet online it's harmony of product very much so, and so I think we can learn that. You may or not ask a question, but in reverse, it was interesting in terms of what online can learn from the retail and by us to be those operators. One of the things that always struck me when we went into Blue Square and developed online was the different way that customers are viewed from an online environment, if that's all you've ever dealt with. And it took us quite a long time to get our digital people to stop referring to people as accounts and start calling them customers. And I think it's one of the key things that there is a learning, and particularly in a world of responsible gambling, etc., to see people as human beings and customers who may or may not have issues and have problems, but equally think and act as humans, not as bits of digital equipment, is something that we do bring to the online environment, because the people, that kind of approach to marketing is slightly different to just that numbers game and just trying to squeeze more electronic dollars out of an electronic customer. So I think both sides can learn, but so they're so different, not least as was mentioned, because that unlimited stake prize approach, and no, almost having come from a world of very little regulation to the kind of chains we carry behind us of legislation in the retail world. It does make the two very different products, but I think, as Mike said earlier on, hopefully in 10 years' time, when I'm sitting in a retirement home somewhere,
That's your dream?
I'll
Dream big.
I'll read in a paper somewhere about how they are literally now big online companies that are big retail businesses and vice versa, and that everything works together as it should be. Or it could be the nightmare scenario that the retail business has been snuffed out because it's been overtaken by technology and the law didn't keep up. Open goal.
If you ask what they do, online did well. I'd say innovation, and I think there's innovation in product, innovation in marketing, and that's primarily because of the lack of regulation.
Yeah.
Regulation tends to hold things static, and there's very little you can do in that, whereas in the early days, I was staggered back in the early 2000s. We spent some time talking to an Israeli marketing group as to exactly what they could do and how much they knew about the customers and how they could incent those customers and how they knew it was all automated, how much, the whole bidding process for search words, keywords, etc. It was completely automated, and they knew what the value was of a certain word, and it would just feed back. Completely different world from the retail environment. And so I'd just say innovation is really what they were, and I think still are very good at that.
I think just to add that, automated CRM systems online are far in excess of anything we have in land-based. You could visit a land-based casino, maybe lose £200 or £300, not be noticed, and certainly not be contacted by the casino. If you do that online, it will be fully automated. You'll be hit with text messages, maybe phone calls, emails. I went on holiday recently, and I clearly used sports betting myself. So being out of the country for 2 weeks, I was being pestered by notifications. How are you? Where are you? Come back, please. We miss you.
End your holiday early, please. How much do you bet, John? Jesus.
But actually, on a positive side of that, which is a positive anyway, but from the responsible gambling side, that is actually something we have learned as well. It's a good point. That ability to be able to know exactly what people are doing, which there will be people following the radio. So, we and others have developed what we call a propensity model to be able to track people's play and look for problem behaviour, which has been something we can be able to develop online and have done, and has become quite a useful tool. And because of that, it's made us ask the question, why can't we do that on retail? We've got loyalty, which is growing. About 50% of our customers use our loyalty cards now. And so we're beginning to develop the model on the retail as well. And we may not have ever gone there if we didn't have that experience from digital. So that is quite a big piece of learning in terms of, not just marketing, but actually for the good of customers as well.
Why do you think that the sports betting market has been more successful online than the terrestrial sports betting market has been more successful online than the terrestrial casino gaming market? Andrew?
I'd say betting's transactional. Basically, it's like Amazon. It's not experiential, whereas a casino game is a game.
But at the same time, 888's become massive, and based on a casino product mainly. Other sites have become massive on casino products.
Yes, but it's a different experience, is what I'm saying. As you were asking, why were they massively successful to start with? Because essentially, it's a transactional business. It's just like Amazon. If you think about it, I have an opinion. I want to place a bet. The faster you can place that bet, the faster I can order a book, the faster that book is delivered, I will go to that site. And so betting is about that instant transaction, whereas casino games, it's about the experience of playing the games. I mean, the amount of money that's put into the look of the game, the volatility of the game, the return to player, the hit rate, all of the hit frequency, all of that is nothing like. Now, what's happening is you're getting that hybrid now with betting, where in-game betting, and that I think is a much more experiential. And that I think is because you're trying to hold their attention for the period of the game. So that's changing the nature of betting. But originally it was just.
But at the same time, it needn't be the terrestrial betting operator that was successful, just like the terrestrial casino operator wasn't tremendously successful in the casino space. It could have been the Betfairs or the sporting bets of the time that just wiped out the Ladbrokes and the Paddy Powers. How did Ladbrokes, Paddy Powers, and William Hill do so much better
it's
than
that
the
trust of name again, isn't it? I mean, Ladbrokes, William Hill, these are names that if you want to go and place a bet online and betting, perhaps, that there's always been that image of dodgy backstreet betting, a guy with a trilby hat or something. Can I trust this person to take my bet and pay me? And so when people were looking for, as Andrew rightly says, it was that convenience, I'm sure, of suddenly finding that instead of having to go all the way down to a betting shop, I could do it from the comfort of my armchair whilst watching the match, the race, or whatever. But who am I going to do it with? Well, I want to do it with the same people. Whereas with casinos, where I think it is growing in terms of that ability with the brand names, that was what gave them the leverage, and therefore, because they were much bigger and had the money to advertise, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, coming in now is Mike Bet or whatever, honest guy that he is, doesn't own a trilby hat, I'm sure, smart guy that he is, but to get that trust is to, I'm going to place a bet on something with Mike Bet, and I know he'll pay me back. Whereas I'm sure with Ladbrokes and such like, someone who's looking to bet for the first time, and there is that growing marketplace, the idea of betting on matches, but to see a name you recognise has got to be a starting point, I'm sure, with people in terms of confidence.
On the trust, I kind of disagree with. I agree with you on trust. I disagree with where you're placing the trust. I don't think there's any fear of someone not being paid, but I do think brand's important. But perhaps an answer, or something that contributes to the sportsbook success, is the fact that there are so many more retail sportsbook outlets showing that, let's say, William Hill name to the high street than there are casinos showing whatever casino name it might be. Casinos are generally not branded as one particular brand across every casino. They usually have local branding, whereas William Hill is William Hill in all 800 shops. So perhaps it's brand recognition and thinking, I want to place a bet. Oh, I've just driven by the William Hill a second ago. I'm thinking William Hill. And subconsciously, maybe you're getting that. And maybe it's also to do with product, because the sports betting product needn't be as advanced as the casino product to compete at a level with the largest digital-only operators. Andrew?
So I was just going to say, if you think about it, Bet365 shouldn't really exist, because the land-based were big, well-capitalized. They should have just eaten that market. I was at a conference, and I don't want to tell you how many years ago, too many years ago, and one of the CEOs for the betting companies was there, and it was in the early days of online, and he picked up his phone and said, we don't need an online presence. We have an online presence. People can call us and speak to our customers, and that was his attitude.
Yeah.
It was really, he didn't understand the technology and what it meant, and didn't understand the product. I think one of the other things that is really important, and for anybody to be successful in this business, is commitment. You really have to commit to it. You can't do it in a sort of half-assed way, which people do.
Correct.
They're sort of the land-based. When they first went in, it was an add-on to their business. It isn't. It's a separate business. But if you look now at William Hill's and Ladbrokes, they make more money from their casino than they do online, than they do from betting. It's a bigger part of their business. So they shouldn't have allowed it to get away from them, and they did. And they're playing catch-up.
Yeah, I could agree with you on the commitment. It requires a massive commitment. Well, let me ask you this. Are there reasons going forward for online operators to start gobbling up terrestrial casinos? They clearly have the cash. They have the ability. Are we going to see a world where some of the larger online players start to buy terrestrial gaming?
Well, certainly in the U.S. that's a possibility, because as I alluded to before, it's a requirement to get a license to have land-based presence. So in jurisdictions that follow that model, that certainly would be incentive for that kind of acquisitions.
Very good point. Yeah.
In the UK, I wouldn't expect the higher tax rate, the overheads, and everything else that I wouldn't think it would be appealing to them at all.
I mean, it's got to be something that makes it worth the investment, and there is an example in terms of PokerStars having bought into the Hippodrome, and it goes back to what I said earlier on about poker players wanting a live venue, and I think PokerStars recognise that, and they always held their finals in a retail environment, often for some of their bigger tournaments, EPT, etc. Have done for many years. So that ability to gain access to a database of real people and to be able to have live events gave that appeal to buy in as a kind of a partial share, but without having the grief of physically having to run a business. So whether many others would actually, I think John's quite right, see that the grief and aggravation of physically buying it would achieve anything, it's got to be that would enhance their business beyond just buying some customers who we know are incredibly promiscuous generally, and even to buy an online brand, if it doesn't mean you're buying all of those customers' loyalty, they may still go somewhere else because it was that brand they liked. So it's a very delicate market, but I mean, the cost of a retail casino is huge, and I'm sure it's a big decision. So I think the Hippodrome PokerStars may be one of the rare ones, or it's more likely to be that they would buy in a sponsorship deal, which has been talked about, sponsoring a card room, as opposed to actually owning a premises, its staff, and all the grief that goes with it, which makes us all very grey-haired.
I might slightly disagree. Not about grey hair, but I might slightly disagree, because I think I'm a believer that a bricks and mortar casino should have an online presence complementary to that business. I think they should, as part of the business model. And I'm also a believer in the human spirit, that humans are sociable creatures. So a standalone online without any bricks and mortar presence, in that context of that belief of mine, doesn't make sense. I totally get what John's saying about the tax rate making it a little bit unattractive and hard work. Let's think longer term rather than short term. Longer term, if that works its way through, I think online operators should have a bricks and mortar presence. Do they acquire or do they build their own? You acquire, you take a lot of legacy on, but you also get skills. And one of the chaps was referring before about the way online operators view customers. It wasn't really about accounts, the nature of accounts. And I talked to a few of the online CEOs, and it's very mathematical. There's somewhere in there's a customer, but it's mathematical. This margin, this return, bang, 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 bang. And I think that might be a skill set that would help online operators understand that these are real people with real lives and real money and real problems and real opportunities and all those sort of things. So longer term, again, maybe it's 10 years, I don't know, maybe it's 15 years, but there should be, in my mind, a land-based presence associated with an online operator. I might annoy the audience with that, but that's my view.
I like the contrary view. I'm going to give one in a minute. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yes.
Just to flip that question on its head, actually. Yeah. So, do you see land-based operators potentially risking developing their own platforms online? I hear from online operators that I talk to every day that having your own proprietary software platform is such a strength. So, will the land-based ever see or ever take the risk of that step to try and compete in that market?
I would say, if I can, we have a proprietary system at Genting, so we've taken that step.
I think it's a great question. If I can develop it, I think it depends on the territory, doesn't it? Genting have been very brave in doing that, but how do you differentiate? Because there's so many big. Look at the UK business model: 50% tax rate, labour costs, rent, blah 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 blah. What's left? Not a lot. So therefore, you say, well, we can build our own technology and hire a team of 500 IT guys and blah 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 marketing guys, or we white label it and we know we make X%. And that's the lazy is the wrong word to describe it, but it's kind of the default choice, present company excluded. How do you then create something that's differentiated enough in the market that it's attractive enough but still has the products that customers like to see? That there's another challenge, I think. If we went to say, the US market changes substantially, a company like Caesars could be one that would develop its own platform. The experience in Europe with Caesars so far has not been the case, because online casino was worth X, social mobile gaming, well, that'd be worth a bit. Oh my God, suddenly we've got a business worth $4.4 billion. Didn't expect that. Just people paying 20 cents or 50 cents a go, so the distraction changed a little bit. So I think the bigger operators, to differentiate, probably should consider a platform difference. And and then I think you can also then somehow, or in some ways, avoid that migration of customers. So you do a white label with 888, and for a period of time, Caesar's 888 play. I'm bored of this. All right, I'm now with blah 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 brand with 888, and then blah 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 brand with 888. I just move around 888 rather than Caesar's getting the benefit of it. Speaking personally.
I think though actually developing your own system for us, it's caused bigger issues in some ways, from a regulatory perspective and a marketing perspective, to have a single customer view. So if you're a customer with us land-based, you're in our casino management system. If you're a customer with us online, you're in our proprietary online system. So from AML and responsible gambling purposes, we need a single customer view, and currently that is essentially a manual system.
It's a very interesting question. It has to do. I mean, it touches on a lot. It also also touches on the question asked before regarding sportsbook being successful in casinos. Not to launch a sportsbook, competitive sportsbook product is easier in a lot of ways than developing a casino product that's competitive. So you see a lot of big sportsbook operating their own software, but bringing in a white label casino. But then at the same time, you see the whole dynamic of the white label online casino. And let's not call it a white label. Let's call it a license of an online casino. A white label would imply someone else is managing it. You're going to manage it yourself, but you're going to bring in everyone else's technology. But now, instead of bringing in a set of games and a suite of games like you used to, you're bringing in a platform that's content neutral, and you're able to choose games from NetEnt and IGT and anyone else. So the market's kind of fundamentally changing. But it might also attribute to the success of the sports book compared to the casino going from terrestrial to online. Did we answer the question? I can't remember what it was. Oh, the buying casino. Yeah.
Can I ask John a question? Can we have a panel question? Does it work, John? Are you happy that that's the right direction?
I think we started with the Playtech solution, the turnkey. There are clear advantages to having your own systems, being able to develop it. Would we do it again? I'm not sure.
Okay. How many staff do you have managing that software?
Less than we did 6 months ago, I think.
6 months ago?
If I can put it like that.
Did you have around 90 6 months ago?
Honestly, I can't remember
I think you had about 100 staff in the online department, Genting, and maybe 80 must have been developing and marketing.
We've recently onshored it from Guernsey, so we brought it back to Birmingham, mainly so we could have everybody in one room, in one office, so people can work together. And we can have shared services such as compliance, AML, responsible gambling can be pulled.
The problem always is now you're in the software development business forever.
Yes.
You don't develop it and leave it. It's you're continuing developing with the same size staff or larger every single year on year. It's very, very
We kind of took a
interesting way
hybrid
to go.
version of that insofar as we, our platform when we moved to Bead last year, kind of got the best of both worlds in some ways. We didn't want to be with a very small fish in the huge sea of a Playtech or such like, where it's very difficult to get bespoke things done for you, but developing your own is a big enterprise, as John said. So Bead was a very small platform which we could then become a big fish with and work very closely with and develop ourselves, but with them doing the hard graft. So it's beginning to work a lot better. It's certainly changed things in the last 12 months much for the better, not teething problems, etc. But I think there's a lot to be said for to having the control rather than just, you can just be a white label, you can just be just take the off the shelf and wait for the money to come in. But if you really want to expand and develop, as we obviously all want to, and as I said, to tap into that market, you've got to go a little bit further and have a lot more control over everything. And that's certainly the way we've tried to go with working closely with Bead, and it seems to be paying dividends.
The hybrid model is interesting. You're not the only company, of course, to do that recently, whereby you have a few operators that are contributing toward the development of a single platform. You've kind of seen that with the William Hill NYX and OpenBet deal, whereby William Hill's taken up effectively a position in its supplier of sports betting. And that's kind of a trend that may actually become popular, because to take everything in-house, as you say, is very difficult, John. To outsource everything provides certain risks, and you're at the behest of your developer, but to buy into your developer is probably a decent idea. And we've seen that a number of times lately. Do we have any final questions before we run out of time? Then in that case, I'm going to be slightly contrarian. so I apologize for playing devil's advocate to the operators in the room. I think Andrew was entirely right. I think being a successful operator obviously requires a massive commitment, not just from the online gaming team, which I'm sure you all have, but at the board level. I would disagree with Richard. You have the money to go online and compete with the big boys. It's not $20 million a year or $20 million a month. It's $1 million a month, or it's $2 million a month. And the large casino groups can't afford that if the board wanted to allocate that resource in that direction. I asked questions about how Wall Street rewards iGaming. Well, it depends on what market you're traded on, but generally really well. There are great analysts in the gaming and leisure sector that very well understand the online gaming market, both in the U.S. and in the U.K. I'm not sure that trust is the best asset that the land-based casino has, because there are so many other amazing assets that land-based casinos have. Like you say, live gaming is your remit. Live gaming is so big online. You can certainly do that. You have the facilities to do that. You can do that from the casino floor. You can use virtual reality or augmented reality to provide the same experience you have in your land-based casinos online, if you think that's what your customers really want. And you have, as Richard said, the customers that get, you have customers rather than accounts. You have a personal touch. You have a VIP care system that's second to none in the entertainment industry anywhere in the world. I mean, land-based casinos are the best at that. And that equals loyalty. So you've got loyalty on your side more than trust. You've got people that say, oh, I want to bet with them because they look after me. They send me 6 emails when I go on holiday to ask me to come home. please, leave Greece. Come home. And the negatives, though, what I think everyone's going to have to accept in the terrestrial casino world that maybe have been holding them back in the past is that really successful operators online, besides perhaps PokerStars, but they're migrating toward a model where they're offering more product, is that you're not just an online casino. You're going to need to be an online casino, an online sportsbook, an online bingo room, an online poker room. You're going to have to offer pretty much everything across the board, because when you're onboarding new customers, spending that $1 million or $2 million a month in television advertising, you're going to want to cross-sell them, or else you're not going to be able to afford to buy them at the same rate as your competitors who are buying customers in and then cross-selling them across essentially all of the different products. So Andrew brought up the innovation point, and I would say that on that point, the land-based casinos actually really do need the online market, because, as you've mentioned before, Mike, the land-based casinos in 10 years' time traditionally have looked like the land-based casinos 10 years previously. Yep. So online allows you to try out new products really quickly. IGT gave a great speech about that at one of the conferences, saying, look, we could trial a slot machine online that would take us a few £1 million, 6 months of compliance, and a year in a casino to see if it works, and we could trial it online in something like a social betting casino, a social betting site, and see within a matter of months if it works with actually no regulation at all. And so it's a wonderful platform for that. But more so, we need to appeal to a new generation, and I'm just not sure that the generation that's coming up now, playing video games, being on esports, being very used to using their iPhone for everything, is going to find that casino experience, despite it being physically social, appealing in its current state. I'm sure there's something that we're going to do, because we've always led the entertainment industry. We've always been the biggest portion of the entertainment industry. But I think it's the online that's going to lead that innovation and appeal to that next group. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Michael Caselli, and it's been my pleasure to chair today. Thank you.
David, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us.
Just one favor, if somebody could pass me a Danish from the back of the room.
You got it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael. Good night.